Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to this conference. Since migration and the development of the multicultural society is one of the most urgent issues for education, as far as I'm concerned. I've been working with migration and education since late 70s. First as a teacher for newly arrived students, thereafter as a junior lecturer at the teacher training program. And since my dissertation in 2004, has my research been focusing on leadership in multicultural school, or leadership for social justice. What I'm going to share with you today is what necessary changes has to be done in schools if you have to promote all students' learning, with emphasis on all students' learning, no matter background. My point of departure is based on national and international research on successful measures in multicultural schools. But my speech is, of course, also colored by a Swedish perspective. We haven't had war since 1809. And Sweden is characterized of social democratic politics, which of course have had impact on the educational school system and also influenced my perspectives. I'm also well aware of how school leaders and teachers in multicultural schools struggle in a complex situation, often without any training at all for diverse classrooms. I'm very well aware of that. But my purpose is to highlight some significant issues for consideration in intercultural education. I have to generalize, and I have to focus on narrow pieces in this issue. This is an 8-hour lecture cut down to 20 minutes. So please remember I'm generalizing. But first I would like to bring you into the Swedish context. Conditions for education have changed. However, change is not a new phenomenon. National conflicts and migration have always affected schooling. Sweden is, as all societies, a multicultural society from a gender perspective, from a social class perspective, religious, sexual orientation, etc., etc. But my focus today is due to migrant causes. Immigration to Sweden is not a new phenomenon, even if we think so, but we have forgot our history. The description of Sweden as an ethnic homogeneous society is correct for the 19th century, when 1 million Swedes took the boats. Speaking of boat refugees, 1 million left for North America due to poverty and persecutions. But earlier and later, we have always been an ethnically heterogeneous country. The immigration history shows that immigrants have constantly influenced Sweden. Traditions and expressions that are regarded as Swedish can be traced to, for example, Greece, to Turkey, to Germany, to Italy. But after the World War II, where we weren't involved, at least not with military, but in other ways, the coward ways, the immigration of labor started in the 50s and in the 60s, and after that it was replaced by the arrival of refugees, and that is a movement that have increased. In 2015 was the amount of asylum seekers very dramatic. In 2014, there were 80,000 asylum seekers, a number that was doubled a year later. One can also say, behind the numbers, there are human beings. One can also say 46,000 new students between 7 and 17 years old. Coming to a context, yes, we are used to, we have those preparatory classes, we have if you call it multicultural schools, but they ended up, this amount of students, in a context with an extremely lack of qualified teachers, and also an extremely lack of teachers in Swedish as second language. So late 2015, the organization for reception collapsed, mainly in the south part of Sweden and in the middle part of Sweden. I come from the very north part of Sweden. We didn't notice much of that collapse. But anyway, the Minister of Agency couldn't administer the amount of errands to handle. We have had, in general, a quite positive attitude to migration. And that is demonstrated in legislations, in regulations, in policy, and in culture. But during the last year, racism and xenophobia has increased. Since 2010, the political party Swedish Democrats, not to mix with Social Democrats, the Swedish Democrats, who have a very hostile attitude to immigrants, they are now the third biggest political party in Sweden, and we have them in the parliament as well. So last fall, in the chaotic situation, the public voices for restrictive migration policy were raised, and the rhetoric from the government concerning this issue became tougher. New border controls were brought in January 16, as were stricter rules surrounding family reunion. And you can see, no. Here is the number for 2016. There you are. So it had effect. We have less immigrants today than we had the year before, and also that we had the year for many years. Let's move on then. But immigration has always had impact on national steering documents for education, but they have been expressed in various ways. Here you have the School Act, and here you have 3 examples of curricula, School Act and curricula. They have always, as the current curricula and School Act, been based on values that emphasize all students' equal right to education and include equality between women and men, and an active work against discrimination at school. Discrimination based on gender, ethnicity, religion, or other beliefs, sexual orientation, harassment, or other stuffs. So all those documents cover international agreements, such as, for instance, Convention of the Rights of the Child. The policy documents promote an equivalent and equitable education for all students, and I repeat that because it's quite important, with the understanding that education should be adapted to each student's needs and circumstances, irrespective of the student's background or where it is provided, where in Sweden it is provided. Teaching must consider children and pupils of different needs. They shall be given support and stimulus to promote their development. The ambition is to outbalance the children's and students' different prerequisites to profit by the teaching. And this task is not unique for Sweden. Schools are in general viewed as important social institutions, and education in particular is viewed as a primary means of facilitating the harmonious development of a diverse society. A diverse society we have. So, with such supportive policy and regulations, everything must be just fine in Sweden. Or? No. There are problems that have to be challenged. Schools are, in general, no matter how the student's body is composed, even if it's a lot of migrant students or whatever, social class and gender, it's kind of treated as if it is monocultural. And I will make a pause saying we have a lot of good examples in Sweden too. We have. But we have, in general, a problem we have to work with. Schools, the monocultural schools with assimilation as an underpinning goal. The students with migrant backgrounds, they are described from a deficit perspective. They are described as different compared to the ordinary, to the normal Swedes, the normal student. They welcome diversity in rhetoric, while in practice demonstrates a desire for assimilation. Or man can also put it, Swedishness is the starting point for norms, ideals, or goals for remedial measures teaching. And this viewpoint is reflected in a lot of reports by the School Inspectorate and the National Agency for Education, saying that social class, gender, and ethnicity matters when it comes to school success. There is still a strong correlation between socioeconomic background and how students succeed in school. Students with migration background, this is a very difficult, the concept migration background is really problematic, but I don't have time to deal with that now. But we are not talking about those coming from the United States or Germany. It's saying those with mainly newly arrived, but those more far out from Europe in this context. They have, as a group, has a lower grades compared with so-called ethnic Swedes. So also an interesting concept. And they are overrepresented in the groups that are not qualified for higher education. But the overarching influence on student success is social class. How can that be explained? Well, the increased diversity can be handled out of different angles, and I'm continuing a way of what we have heard today and yesterday. If you have a monocultural perspective in the school, then the goal is assimilation, and the focus is on the students and the parents' shortcomings. We tolerate the others. Okay, you can be here, but please behave like us. But migration demands new educational skills for teachers and also other standpoints. With an intercultural perspective, is diversity regarded as a positive challenge for development? The prefix inter means coming together, have a mutual respect, and also what we've heard today, a dialogue. And an intercultural perspective in education is an important factor for students' success. The school principal the school leader has the utmost responsibility and accountability for the school's mission, teaching and learning. So the question is, how can the school leader create an organization that support all students' teaching and learning? Using a systematic theory and looking at the school as a learning organization, and you can transform this to other organizations because all organizations have a core something. I use Hoy and Miskel's social system model for schools. Every school has its unique prerequisites with the resources and human capital, etc., etc. And within this, there is a transformation process focusing on teaching and learning, and there's supposed to be an outcome of this. And the teacher in Sweden has the power to organize the inner organization. And the teacher can also have influence on the inner organization. So I would like to focus on the inner organization. A structure that supports teaching and learning means that you organize the school or the other organization what you have that support the core assignment here, teaching and learnings. You have staff meetings in small or larger groups with a very clear agenda and a very clear purpose focusing on students' learning. And a structure that supports collegial learning, and that's a challenge for the culture. Instead of being the individual in my own classroom, you have to support collegial learning and collaboration between subject teachers, between the subject teacher and the mother tongue teacher, and also the teacher in bilingual scaffolding. There has to be routines screening newly arrived students, their competences and their experiences as soon as possible, so the planning and accomplishing for education is based on what the students really can and have been experienced. There has to be a routine for analysis and evaluation of the results, meaning we pedagogues, we are quite good at describing, but we have to start analyzing the results. And finally, in the structure, by inviting parents to participate to genuine collaboration, talking with them instead of to them, they can be encouraged to take greater responsibility for the children's education, which in turn has a democratic value. And the parental cooperation is a significant factor for school success. Culture. Promoting diversity in school is not an easy task. School leaders, teachers, parents, students come together with different gender, socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds, which influence their values concerning teaching and fostering what is right and wrong, who is good and bad. But as a professional, the school leader and the teacher and the health staff are supposed to work in accordance with stipulated standards. Individual values should not have impact in a negative way on their attitudes and their teaching. So therefore a shared vision and professional values are crucial. And the leader has the responsibility to challenge the norms and values that impede students' learning. All who work in school have a joint responsibility, not only the classroom teacher or the mother tongue teacher. And finally, don't blame the students for failure. When analyzing the students' results, must the critical question be, what do we as teachers have to do differently? That's another challenge. Power is not a problem in itself, the problem is how it is used. And we also need norms. They help us to navigate as human among humans. But we don't need norms that have negative impact on students' learning, norms that exclude and marginalize. So besides those in the circle, in Swedish context, we have to analyze and challenge the white, middle-class, heterosexual male norms that are underpinning assumptions in school. So important questions to start with is, who are normal? And what is it to be different? And why? And what are the consequences? Individuals is about the school leaders and the staff members' cognition and motivation. It is about qualified personnel with intercultural competence who work in accordance with the School Act and in the curricula. It's about to start with, here it comes again, start with myself, my values, my norms, my biases, my preconceptions. It's about inclusion instead of exclusions. It's about competence to handle conflicts. We have conflicts. It's about competence to communicate and empathy. It's about relevant in-service training for diverse classroom and about hiring staff members that mirrors the body of students. So to conclude, the school has a democratic mission, meaning fostering democratic human beings in a diverse society. And we cannot stand in the door and say, you are welcome, you are not. Okay, you can come in if you behave. That's not the assignment. It is the school's task to adapt and develop optimally supportive structure and culture. The school has to examine whether the school's culture and structure contribute or not to marginalization of different groups. We cannot say we have always done like this. We have to change if our analysis illustrates that the change is needed. Walking the diversity walk as a leader, but also as a staff member, we have all responsibility, involves the acknowledgement of diversity of all kinds. So one can question, okay, we highlighted the diversity of different nationalities, but is there a limit? Do we talk about sexual orientation, for instance? And finally, to defend children's and students' rights to equal education is a significant task for all school personnel. If we in school don't, who will do it? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Katarina. I'd like to ask you a quick question just to follow up. Based on everything that you said, I'd like to just take your opinion on the matter that Sweden has very often been, or very often is, considered a role model in when it comes to tolerance. Do you feel personally that that Sweden has earned this title?
Yes, in some way, yeah. When we talk about the documents, the School Act, the curriculum, there is nothing wrong with it. Nothing, but I think we have and we share it when I'm in other international conference, the tradition of how teachers think, how they perceive their individual rights to interpret what they are supposed to do, how they should work according, how they transform the curricula into practice. But we have become better on that. More and more principals are brave enough to challenge the problematic culture. And well, also the school inspectorate, they just point out and say, you have to shape up, otherwise there are fines to pay.
Thank you very much.
So,
thank you.
Thank you.